Notice is hereby given that a public hearing be held on Monday, January 26, 6 p.m., 14 Baker Street, Patchogue, New York, to amend section 435-22C of Village Code to provide an exception for non-habitable and/or basement space when calculating the off-street parking credit, and to require any payment in lieu of parking space to be made prior to issuance of a building permit. Copy of which proposed local law is on file at the office of the village clerk. At said public hearing, any person will be interested will be given an opportunity to be heard.
This has to do with what we call a PILOP, a payment in lieu of parking, in that there is a fee that is charged if you go from the dry retail to restaurant space, space. If you were dry retail, which most of our businesses were at one point in time, now you move into what obviously is beginning to happen where it's restaurant space. The number of parking spaces needed is much greater. So what we do is the building and housing, the building department has a calculation as follows, based upon square footage, for the number of parking spaces needed for dry retail, and there's a different formula for restaurants. What we do is if the restaurant comes in, for argument's sake, based upon the occupancy and the square footage, they need 60 spaces. The prior use required 20 spaces. They have to pay for the additional 40 spaces. One of the things we didn't account for within the law, and we use total building square footage. So most buildings have both attic space, and many times storage, basement space, which is storage, but not habitable space, space that cannot be used for the purpose of serving the public. So what we're saying here in this law is that non-habitable space will not be included within the calculation, and basically only the space that is used by the public, not any space that is not used by the public, whether it be attic space, basement space, with storage space or closets. It'll be just the usable space by the public.
What about kitchen space?
Kitchen space, it does because you have people working in the kitchen.
Right.
You understand? It would count because, and that's all taken into account within the total calculation, all of those kinds of things. But it is habitable space.
So it's considered habitable space.
So, all it is, this piece of legislation is just a function of it. And we have some things that are, one of the reasons, we have some things that are coming through the planning board that this would affect, that we need to really kind of get this on the books to be able to clear it up. Comments by the board? Comments by the public? Mr. Wojcik.
Good evening, everybody. John Bojek, 8 Street. I remember speaking at the original public hearing on this, so the law's been in effect for about a year, so have we actually gotten money?
Oh, yes, we
Money
have.
forward?
Yeah, on South Ocean Avenue, there's the Hoshi, not Hoshi, but there's a sushi place.
Going into the old J's in the center there.
And do you have an example of how much the,
I don't know.
10,000, 20,000, 30,000?
It was about 20,000, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Rumbo also has a calculation because they're adding additional spaces, which is exactly what we wanted to catch. The Rumbo project.
Okay.
That's where the Thai restaurant was.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So do they pay an upfront lump sum payment?
Yes.
All right.
It then goes into a dedicated capital fund
For parking, for future
Yeah.
parking.
And that's as it goes along with the meter money and those other things, so that when we at a point that we can start to create more parking, to alleviate some of the issues
Right.
that Mr. Kasmarkis is speaking about.
Okay, so this equation is gonna probably reduce the pilot fee, right?
The opposite.
Yeah, is it increase it?
Yep. Because the catching this, or excluding this space from the credit increases the number of parking spaces you would otherwise have to pay for. Because if you included this amount, these non-habitable spaces and basement spaces in your retail credit, you could reduce, by increasing the number of cars you have on your retail credit, would decrease that deficit that you would have if you inserted a restaurant. So now what we've done is we reduced the square footage and that would increase the number of parking spaces you would have to pay for if you were gonna change your use from retail. The retail economic encouragement that this board wanted to adopt continues. If you went retail to retail, you do not have to buy a parking spot in Patchogue. However, if you went from retail to bar, and then you wanna play, the argument that, with gross square footage, you have attic space and you have basement space, so I really only have to pay for this many parking spots, that's the gap that this legislation is proposing to change.
So I completely misunderstood. I thought it was gonna be reducing the fee, so it's not increasing.
It actually does because
It doesn't increase the fee, it eliminates square footage, the fee amount per spot remains the same.
Okay, so then, the only thing I would, I presume you're gonna adopt this anyway, the only thing I would suggest is 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 is a lot of money for a new business. Yeah, I know in some of the other jurisdictions that adopted this, they permitted businesses to pay that fee over a couple of years, so it wasn't a big impact. That might be something you might think about.
we work with it also. And the other part about it is that once you get into somebody who's investing $500,000 in something, if they're squeezing themselves at $20,000 or $10,000 or $15,000, what's the viability of the business itself over time?
Okay, so it was 50, 60,000, that's a.
But we're very upfront with them at the beginning of it, so they were able to manage these dollars into whatever their plan is, whatever their business plan is. So it's not one of these things which, at the end of the deal, you say, oh, by the way, now you'll be $60,000. It's very much on the front end,
Okay.
but it's part of how we do business.
Okay, well then with that one recommendation, sounds like a good change, so thanks.
It's also a lot cheaper than a business having to build their own parking lot, say if they're right on the highway,
Right,
you know, and
right. It's only contribution, those parking spaces, garage spaces about 25,000 to create one parking space in a garage?
Yes.
And correct, and about what, 15,000 for surface parking?
Yeah,
Right?
so we're not getting a lot of spaces.
You're not getting a lot of spaces, you're getting a contribution to it.
Yeah, what you're getting is that money that you can be, you know, an old attorney when told me I was in business, don't think about stacking dollars, think about stacking nickels. You know, because if you spend too much time looking for the dollars, you'll never find the nickels that go along with it. So,
Okay, thank you.
it really is.
Paul,
That Paul is, no, that was at all the legal stand. I'm talking about the legal stand and transportation during that. He looks at me and goes, well, you're spending too much time with the dollars, you'll never find them. But that being said, a motion to approve is presented. Oh, I'm sorry, motion. The motion is second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.